Hey everybody, how you doing? Good to be here with you all tonight. I am back and we are going to have yet another great late night conversation. So let's do it. Here we
Spoken
go.
of the American century. I say that the century on which we are entering can be and must be the century of the common man.
A radical redistribution of economic power.
I mean, we know that racism is just a byproduct of capitalism. Everything would be all right if everything was put back in the hands of the people.
We need a government that will make sure Americans are taken care of and organize the economy to serve the people, not the profits of a wealthy few.
We now have the techniques and the resources to get rid of poverty.
We got to start getting out there with the people.
Get out of the movement and get to the masses.
We need a government of action.
Welcome everybody. I am so glad to be here with all of you tonight. I must tell you, I have not been streaming as much, but I would prefer to be streaming as much. But I've been traveling. I was in Washington, D.C. yesterday. I'm headed back to Washington, D.C. tomorrow. I barely got home, had time to turn around. I'm already heading back to Washington, D.C. It looks like I'm traveling to some other places pretty soon. I'm going around. I was in Chicago this weekend, and last weekend I was in Chicago. Yesterday I was in D.C., going to be in D.C. tomorrow. I am go, and it is springtime, and the allergies are a lot, but I'm here for you because I know these streams are essential for what our community is all about. So I'm glad to be here with all of you. And we're just going to talk tonight. We're going to check in with each other and I'll give you my thoughts on a few things. I'll answer all your questions and we'll try to do this as much as we can. I will say it's been a long day, and I've got another long day coming up tomorrow, but it's all worth it because we are much more than a YouTube channel here. We are a project to change the world and defeat imperialism. And that's not something you can do by sitting in front of a camera. It helps sometimes, and we'll talk about that later. But, we have got a lot to do, and we have a lot of people. And anyway, quick reminder of the way these streams work. First, I give my opening remarks, which is whatever it is that I want to talk about for tonight. While I'm giving my opening remarks, I am answering your questions as they come in. So if you got something you would like me to talk about in the second half of the show, all you need to do is you can ask me a question on Rumble, the Rumble rant, or you can Cash App me. We can't do super chats at the moment because YouTube has demonetized us, but we can take questions on Cash App. So if you have a question, send questions via Rumble rant or super chat or Cash App. Caleb Maupin 22. That is the way that we do questions here. So if you got something you want me to comment on, Cash App me, Caleb Maupin 22, or just send questions via Rumble rant if you're watching on Rumble. That's the best way to do it. Glad that you all are here. Shout out to all of the CPI folks that are out in LA doing outreach today, and we're going to talk about that in a little bit. But we did move the LA workshop. It won't be on April 19th. It's now on May 24th. I'll be out in LA on May 24th because I've been traveling and things come at you fast. But we are still on track for our national convention. July 12th is going to be the biggest event the Center for Political Innovation has ever done. I was just in Chicago last weekend with Peter, myself, with a great local team that we've got out there. And we just had a meeting this afternoon. We checked in with different people, and this is going to be one heck of an event. I'll just tell you that much. We are going to fill up that auditorium, and it's a beautiful, beautiful facility. We visited the facility, the Midwest Conference Center in North Lake, Illinois, right near the Chicago O'Hare Airport. A beautiful, beautiful facility. We are going to fill it up. There's going to be all kinds of great stuff happening there. Uzbek dancers and, cultural performances and speeches and Scott Ritter and Garland Nixon and myself and all of our great CPI people. And it's turning into a real happening. So you don't want to miss it. You don't want to miss it. It's going to be really, really awesome. If you come to one event this year, make it this one. You can register ahead of time so that we know that you're coming. And it's going to be quite a shindig in Chicago. So join us. Other than that, the way we do these streams, I just give my opening remarks while your questions roll on in. And then after that, I answer your questions. So if you got questions you would like me to answer, send them on Rumble as Rumble Rants or Cash App me, Caleb Maupin 22. That's the best way to do it. Let's just jump right into it. Couple things. So shout out to our LA folks, Ishmael, Dan out in Los Angeles. I know they went to the Bernie Sanders AOC rally that happened in Los Angeles today. Bernie Sanders and AOC too. They both have disappointed a lot of us. I was certainly hoping back in 2016 that Bernie Sanders would be somebody who would challenge the power structure. And when it was clear that it was rigged against Bernie Sanders, and when there was mass outrage about that in the Democratic Party, that got me excited. And in 2020, I was hoping that Bernie Sanders' campaign would turn into a serious thing, but we all know that there were lockdowns and there wasn't really a campaign in 2020. AOC, she's a little bit of a different story. I held off hating AOC because I really hoped that there would be a chance she would be better. But she just really made it clear she was a shill for the foreign policy establishment. And the way she reacted to Jimmy Dore and Force the Vote was so ridiculous. They made clear there wasn't even going to be any dissent on the domestic front. And they're out there in the name of their tour that they're doing. It's a good thing I wasn't there because I'm just totally disgusted by them. Both of them, Bernie and AOC. It's a good thing I wasn't there. But the name of their tour that they're doing out there in LA, the name of their tour, they're calling it Fighting Oligarchy. Fighting Oligarchy. Doesn't that sound great? There's a problem with that, which is that, right, the way to defeat oligarchy is with strong leadership. And that's what you don't get. Oligarchy are de facto rulers. They're the people that rule because they have the most money. And the way you defeat oligarchy is not with quote unquote anti-authoritarianism. It's rather by strengthening the institution of the presidency. It's by strengthening state power. And generally, we've had two presidents in our history who have fought against the oligarchy. The first was Abraham Lincoln, who very much fought against the slaveholders. And they were very much, Wall Street at that point was an insurance center that was tied in with the city of London. And Abraham Lincoln fought against the slaveholders, and he organized and carried out the Second American Revolution with the defeat of slavery. And Franklin Roosevelt, the president we had during the 1930s and up through World War II, he also fought against the oligarchy and created Social Security and unemployment insurance and paved all kinds of roads and built all kinds of bridges. And he also fought the oligarchy, and both of them did it by being, quote unquote, authoritarian. I believe both Lincoln and Roosevelt attempted to stuff the Supreme Court to get what they wanted. Both Lincoln and Roosevelt took dramatic action, and both of them faced attempted coups. Abraham Lincoln was eventually assassinated, and Roosevelt faced the business plot to remove him. And both Lincoln and Roosevelt were not afraid to work with communists. Abraham Lincoln had a communist general in the Union Army, August Willich. August Willich rose to the rank of brigadier general. He was a German American who was a communist who had worked closely with Karl Marx, and he led the Ohio 9th Infantry Regiment that occupied St. Louis, Missouri during the Civil War. There was also Joseph Wedemeyer, and there was a whole division of communists who were part of the Union army in the Civil War to defeat slavery. Plus, during the U.S. Civil War, the Republican Party, which was Abraham Lincoln's party, their newspaper was called the New York Tribune. It was edited by Horace Greeley, another Republican who was a U.S. senator and who was a Christian socialist, an advocate of the right of women to vote, etc. And Horace Greeley hired Karl Marx to be his London correspondent. So throughout the war, the Republican Party newspaper of New York City was running the works of Karl Marx. In addition to that, Karl Marx himself organized a mass anti-slavery rally in London. The International Working Men's Association organized a huge mass meeting, they called it, against slavery. And Abraham Lincoln himself sent a greeting, an official letter from the White House to the anti-slavery rally organized by Karl Marx. So Abraham Lincoln was not afraid to work with communists, and Abraham Lincoln was, quote unquote, authoritarian in the fact that he tried to stuff the Supreme Court, in the fact that he, used the power of the presidency to, centralize authority and crush the slaveocracy. And you could say the same for Roosevelt. Roosevelt aligned himself with labor unions that were led by communists. He greeted and welcomed communists to sleep over at the White House. Gilbert Greene, leader of the Young Communist League, was being investigated by the U.S. Congress for his ties to the Roosevelt administration. Roosevelt let him sleep over at the White House to make a statement. A. Philip Randolph, the leader of the Brotherhood of Sleeping Car Porters, came over to the White House many times, and he was known to be a friend of the Communist Party and anti-racist activist, a labor leader, and many leaders of the CIO, the Congress of Industrial Organizations, which broke from the AFL, the American Federation of Labor, which had no ban on communists, had plenty of communist activists leading it, United Auto Workers, etc. They met with Roosevelt many times. And then Roosevelt, as you will recall, aligned with the Soviet Union and with China in the struggle against fascism. And it was, the Red Army that took Berlin, and the U.S. government happily gave guns and weapons to the Soviet Union and happily gave guns and weapons to Mao and the 8th Route Army to fight Japan in China. And Edgar Snow, the Marxist journalist who wrote Red Star Over China, the best-selling book glorifying Mao Zedong, he went to the White House many times and met with Roosevelt to advise him on Chinese policy. There are many, many examples of Franklin Delano Roosevelt. I was happy to work with Russia, happy to work with China, happy to work with communist activists, and utilize the power of the presidency in a, quote, authoritarian way against the oligarchy. And so the notion that, quote, anti-authoritarianism, which is the tone, that's the talking point of the Democrats right now, is that they're saying that Trump is authoritarian, and fighting the oligarchy go hand in hand. This is not correct. If anything, it requires authoritarianism to combat the oligarchy, because the oligarchy win by default, and that is what makes them the oligarchy. They're the people that rule because they happen to have the most money. Oligarchy is ruled by the rich. It's plutocracy, right? My understanding is that in ancient Greece, in the ancient Greek city-states, there was an assumption or an understanding that the city-states went through a cycle. That first they would have a king, which was normal back in these times to have a king, and that king would be a good king who took his leadership responsibly, made all the decisions, and a good king is called a monarchy. But after a couple generations, you new king, and then his son becomes a new king, the monarchy would deteriorate into tyranny, and that tyranny is a bad king. A king who, doesn't think about other people, doesn't think about the good of the nation, is only concerned about himself, etc. And tyranny is the bad king. Monarchy is the good king. Tyranny is the bad king. And tyranny then results in oligarchy. The king is removed and replaced by a responsible elite, right? Of the elite people, the most high-achieving, wealthy people of the society, the elite, they become the oligarchy that rules over responsibly. But oligarchy then deteriorates after a while, after a few generations, into plutocracy. And plutocracy is the rule of a corrupt elite of rich people that are only concerned about themselves, etc. And so, plutocracy deteriorates. You have a self-serving elite. So after a while, plutocracy is overthrown by a republic. The people insist on having an elected government. And so they come together and they elect leaders. They have a republic, and the republic overturns plutocracy. And a republic involves popular sovereignty, a vote. Back then, it was only non-slaves who got to vote, so it was less than 10% of the population, because slaves had no right to vote, women had no right to vote. But among non-slave men, landowning men who were not slaves, they would elect a government, and that was called a republic. But after a while, the republic would deteriorate, the argument went, and it would deteriorate into vulgar mob rule with demagogue politicians who just told people what they wanted to hear, and people getting stupider and more corrupt. And that deterioration of the republic, that was called democracy. And democracy was vulgar mob rule. It was a bad word in the Greek political understanding. And out of the deterioration of democracy, of vulgar mob rule, you would get the rise of monarchy, and the cycle would begin once again. And that was how the ancient Greeks understood the process of government within their city-states. Now, that's a particularly interesting way of viewing things, because all those words are still used. We still talk about monarchy, and monarchy in general political understanding just refers to a government by one person, right? A head of state that is hereditary, a hereditary ruler of a country, the king of England, the king of France, the king of Saudi Arabia, whatever, right? Whereas tyranny doesn't refer to a system of government. It just refers to somebody who's abusing their authority, someone who is mean, a mean, powerful person, a tyrant, right? A strong-armed, mean, authoritarian, bad leader. Right. And a king is a hereditary, and so it's like both of those words are still around. They have different meaning. Right. Oligarchy now, originally, oligarchy was intended to be a good thing. Right. It was a responsible elite, the best and brightest of the nation who, come together and responsibly rule. But now the term oligarchy generally has a negative connotation because it's the rule by certain people that have all the power. And the word oligarch has propaganda value. Many people have pointed out, right? In Russia, they will talk about Russian oligarchs, right? Well, as if there aren't rich people that have a lot of power and influence in the United States, right? If someone is wealthy in Russia, they're an oligarch, right? If someone's wealthy in a country we don't like, they become an oligarch. Whereas if someone's wealthy in America, well, they're just whatever. I mean, it's weird. And the word oligarch in Latin America, it was a term used by populists, right? I believe Juan Perón would rant against the oligarchs, right? And he was referring specifically to the land-owning class of Argentina, right? When Spanish colonialism packed up and left South America after, Simón Bolivar and all of that, there were a layer of wealthy people that lived in South America who were the landowners, and they were largely very light-skinned, and they, they didn't have particular love for the indigenous folks or for the darker-skinned folks, the Africans, etc. And people referred to them as the oligarchs, and often they were tied in with the military. They were the military caste of Latin America. So Juan Perón and other populists in Latin America would rant against the oligarchs. Even though oligarch in ancient Greek was intended to be a good thing, you rarely hear the word plutocracy anymore. That word is not used, right? I mean, it is a word in political vocabulary. It means the rule of the corrupt rich, and it's just something we don't hear very much. It's a word that if someone's trying to sound smart, they say, maybe an NPR essay might talk about plutocracy, but it's a word we just don't use. Oligarchy is used now in a very different connotation. Plutocracy. This word that referred to the rule of a corrupt and decadent rich. That word is just not used anymore. Whereas republic, this is very interesting, republic refers to a form of government in which there are elections, right? When we pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic, right? Republic, right? We have the United States. We have a republic that we elect senators. We elect representatives. Originally, senators were appointed by governors, but now senators are elected. In ancient Rome, the ancient Roman Republic, the senators were hereditary. In Britain, when they set up their system, right, the House of Lords was kind of like their Senate, but it was hereditary, whereas the House of Commons was elected, right? Nowadays in Britain, the House of Lords has very little power. Used to be, though, the House of Lords and the House of Commons were, the bicameral legislature, so to speak. It's not like that anymore in Britain. But in the United States, we have the Senate, which was kind of like the House of Lords, kind of like the Senate in ancient Rome, except it's not hereditary like the House of Lords in Britain or like the Roman Senate, and it's not appointed by the governors as it originally was in the Constitution. These senators are elected by the states. Every state gets 2 senators. And then on top of that, we have a House of Representatives, which is elected. And this is a Republican government, a republic, because we elect the government. And the word democracy, many people think that democracy refers to a political system. But that's not exactly true. If you really look into it, democracy is a concept. If we like a country, we call it a democracy. If we don't like a country, we call it a dictatorship. However, many of the countries that we consider to be democracies are not all that democratic. South Korea is a great example. South Korea, they have elections, etc. However, in South Korea, they have this thing called the National Security Law that says if you say anything that could in any way be interpreted as supporting North Korea, you go to jail. There was a young man who went to prison for tweeting. He retweeted Kim Jong-un, and they threw him in jail, right? How democratic is that? Well, I mean, democracy is a concept. Whereas, there are many countries we don't like, and we claim they're not democratic. Well, they tell us Russia isn't democratic. I've been to Russia, and Vladimir Putin is wildly popular, and he wins the elections, and those elections are fair. And, you might criticize one thing or another thing, but I've been there, and there is no question in my mind that those elections are legitimate. Vladimir Putin is the legitimate winner of the elections. And Venezuela, Hugo Chavez was wildly popular, and he won the elections. And even the Carter Center of Jimmy Carter went there, and they monitored the elections. They said, yep, these are fair elections, but we still insist it's a dictatorship. So it's not a democracy if we don't like it, and it is a dictatorship if we don't like it, and it's democracy if we do like it, even if they do authoritarian things. But democracy is the rule of the people. The rule of the people. And as I have quoted many times on these streams, the rule of the people is a very hard thing to define. And that every democracy is guided, right? There's no way that absolutely everyone can have absolutely the same amount of influence over government. Some people don't care. Some people care a lot and get very invested. Some people don't have the time because they're working very, very hard to feed their kids and pay their bills. Other people have lots of time and they can get involved. And there are all kinds of factors that lead to some people having more influence than others. Now, the primary way in our society that one gains influence over the government is by having a lot of money. And that those who have lots of money, they have the ability to influence government. And we call it democracy, but it is a democracy that is very much guided by wealth. Whereas there are a number of countries around the world I've talked about that are also democracies, but their democracy is also guided. However, their democracy is guided not by whoever has the most wealth, but by a kind of mass movement. And this is where it gets very interesting, right? In Iran, this is the greatest example of this that I ever had. It was a very informative conversation. I sat with an Iranian cleric, and he said that, in Iran, we do not have a pure democracy. We're an Islamic republic. We have elections, but our elections are guided. They are guided by the Guardian Council. And the Guardian Council is the top leaders of the Islamic Revolution, the people who came together and defeated the dictator and overthrew the Shah and defeated the Iraqi invaders and set up the Islamic government or whatever. And they guide our democracy. And the people get to vote, but they make sure that the candidates are in line with the principles, and they, kind of guide the democracy because they control the military, they control the government, and their Guardian Council guides the democracy and approves and disapproves candidates, etc. Well, as it was pointed out to me by this Iranian religious leader, they said, you have the exact same thing in America. It's just called Wall Street. It's called the rich people. The rich people guide your democracy. You call it pure democracy, but it actually just happens to be whoever has the most money guides your democracy. Now, is it better to have your democracy guided by whoever just happens to have the most money, or by the people that led your revolution and lead this mass movement that is trying to fight imperialism and has lifted all kinds of people out of poverty and is trying to improve things in your country? And that many of the countries around the world, that are anti-imperialist countries, are guided democracies. It's just their democracy is not guided by whoever happens to have the most money. It's guided by a revolutionary organization, the Chinese Communist Party. Right? They guide the Chinese democracy. It's pretty much a one-party state, but there's all kinds of involvement, etc. But the Communist Party, with their principles that, defeated the Japanese invaders and, set up the People's Republic, they guide the democracy. They are a revolutionary organization, and they have lifted millions of people out of poverty, and they pick out the best and brightest and high-achieving people, and they guide China's democracy. And it's a revolutionary anti-imperialist movement. It's a mass movement of 90 million people. The Chinese Communist Party is a mass organization that guides the Chinese democracy. And I have pointed out that democracy literally just means rule of the people. That's all it means, rule of the people. And that, in a way, these countries that are guided not by who just happens to have the most money, but rather by a mass anti-imperialist, anti-colonial movement like Iran, like China, like Nicaragua, like Venezuela, like Zimbabwe, right, like Belarus. These countries, in a way, they are more democratic than the Western countries are. And people hear me say that, and they roll their eyes, and they say, Caleb, how can you possibly say that these countries that are very authoritarian, where they don't have freedom of speech, they don't have freedom of the press in the same way we do, even though some of them do, right? I mean, Venezuela is pretty open. I mean, but some of them are pretty strict. I mean, regardless, how can you say that they're more democratic than America is? How can you say that they are more democratic than America is? How can you say that? Because democracy doesn't mean freedom, right? That's not, democracy just means the will of the people. And these countries like China, like Russia, like Venezuela, like Iran, like Cuba, like Nicaragua, like Belarus, all of these countries rely on a very, very heavily organized and involved population. The Islamic Republic of Iran would not be in power for 1 minute if it wasn't for these things they call Basij councils that are in every neighborhood and on every block that actively involve people in running the government. And there are people in every neighborhood and every apartment building, in every block, in every community, in every village that are actively carrying out the goals of the revolution. And they're listening to what the supreme leader says, and then they're knocking on doors in people's neighborhoods, and they're trying to carry out the will of the revolution. And if they didn't have that, the Islamic Republic would be overthrown. And the same goes for China. There's 90 million people that are in the Communist Party that make it their business to go about their workplace, go about their neighborhood, go about their community, enforcing the will of the party and carrying out the party's goals. And the same goes for Nicaragua with the Citizens Power Councils. And that anti-imperialist states are reliant on mass movements in order to stay in power. If there weren't thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of people that were heavily, heavily involved in the process of governing and carrying out the will of the ruling party and enacting the will of the ruling party. If there weren't all kinds of people doing that, these governments wouldn't be in power. Why did the Soviet Union fall? It fell not because they lost public support. They took a vote, a referendum in 1991. Should we keep the Soviet Union? And the population voted yes, overwhelmingly. In fact, the vote to keep the Soviet Union was higher outside of Russia than in Russia. I mean, it was so the idea that it was the Russian Empire exploiting people. The people in the smaller republics wanted to keep the Soviet Union more than the Russians did, but it was overwhelming to keep it. And after the fall of the Soviet Union, even right up to today, Soviet nostalgia is very, very, very high. In former Soviet countries. People say life was better. So it wasn't that they lost public support, it's that the public wasn't involved. When the time came to go out and fight and defend the Soviet Union, the public wasn't involved. The mass participation had faded away. There was so much corruption, and there was a very authoritarian atmosphere that had been created where if you got too involved in politics, you might get killed or whatever. And so because of that, a lot of the population, yeah, they wanted to keep the Soviet Union. They liked it, but they weren't willing to go out and fight for it, and they weren't involved. And the Soviet Union fell. Whereas if you look at the countries that did not fall during that period. You look at countries like North Korea, you look at countries like Cuba, you look at countries like, various anti-imperialist countries around the world. The population remains heavily involved, right? And I've been to Russia and I've seen how now, since 1999, since the rise of Russian President Putin, who's kind of restored state control in a lot of ways and all of that, the population is much more involved. And I mean, I went to the World Youth Festival and I was there with thousands and thousands and thousands of young volunteers who love their country and are heavily involved in the process of building up international support for Russia, et cetera. I mean, and again, the population is very, very involved. And that if democracy means rule of the people, if a government depends on mass participation, that is far more the will of the rule of the people than, our government that just lets us vote every 4 years and really doesn't want us involved at all. So it's much more complicated, I guess. But the whole tone of this fighting oligarchy tour, that authoritarianism and oligarchy walk hand in hand, that is not true. And any government that is becoming authoritarian has to push back against the oligarchy. And the only way you can possibly push back against the oligarchy is by becoming more authoritarian. That said, there are things that Trump is doing that are authoritarian that disgust me. We should not be sending people to El Salvador, to prison camps. That's wrong. I oppose that. We should not be deporting people like Mahmoud Khalil for their political views. I oppose that. But at the same time, Donald Trump is negotiating with Russia, and now he's having indirect talks with Iran. Now, those are two things that never happened under Biden. Biden, representing the oligarchy, wanted to fight with Russia until the end. It looks like Donald Trump is moving to end the war in Ukraine. Joe Biden said he wanted to get along better with Iran, but he didn't do anything about it. Now, Donald Trump, despite having murdered Qasem Soleimani, despite bombing Yemen, which I absolutely oppose, Donald Trump is now in direct talks with Iran, indirect talks in Oman. So Donald Trump, in order to do what he's doing, the small good things that he is doing, he's had to become authoritarian, and that's what they don't like about him. And so I just want to get that. That was the first point I just wanted to make tonight, right? The whole way that AOC and Bernie are framing this, as if authoritarianism and oligarchy walk hand in hand, they don't understand these things. And that essentially what the oligarchy doesn't like about Trump, they don't mind Trump bombing Yemen. I mean, Biden did that. They don't mind Trump supporting Israel. Biden did that. What they don't like is Donald Trump not marching toward World War III. That's what they don't like. And, and in order to do that, Donald Trump has to strengthen the institution, the executive branch of our government, the presidency. You need a strong executive to move in ways the oligarchy doesn't like. And that's what's completely missing from their understanding. So that's the first point I wanted to make tonight. Again, just speaking off the cuff, I'm pretty tired. I'm headed back to DC again tomorrow, and spring allergies and a lot of traveling, and I got very, very busy very, very quickly this week. Was just in Chicago, and great things are happening. But I wanted to make another point. And this is just a point that I keep seeing, right? Because our organization, the Center for Political Innovation, we have been around since 2021. I mean, we've been around as an idea before that, but we really started doing stuff in real life in 2021. We had the Saxton lectures in Pennsylvania, and we had some conferences, and and the Center for Political Innovation. I have dealt with a lot of younger people. Right? I am 37 years old, believe it or not. Some people think I'm really old. Some people think I'm a lot younger than that. My age is 37. Take it or leave it. There was an article that came out about me I'm not going to say too much about it. Someone wrote an article about me a couple days ago, about a week ago. It was published and got a lot of things wrong. The first sentence they had about me was Caleb Maupin was born in 1988. No, I was not. And I just cracked up. Like, that's the first thing they got wrong right out there. The first sentence, Caleb Maupin was born in 1988. I was not born in 1988. I was born in 1987. So, if you're going to write an article about me, you might want to get some things right. I was born in 1987. I am 37 years old. So I've seen a lot of people. And I've worked with a lot of younger folks. It is very hard to stay on the revolutionary road. It is not easy in our times. This is a very, very hard time, not for political activism. This is just a very, very hard time to exist at all. The good paying jobs are not there. Everything costs way more. Rent costs way more. Food costs way more. Student debt is everywhere. Education. I mean, it's really awful what young people are up against. I'm thankful that pandemic didn't happen when I was in high school, or I might not be here. I might have just lost my goddamn mind, right? It was bad enough for me to live in my parents' household when I was a teenager. Imagine not being able to go anyplace. My goodness. So, my heart goes out to young people. And I want to avoid one thing that I do urge people to avoid as much as, unless you're being playful, right? Unless it's being fun, I urge you to always avoid picking on age groups, millennials, Zoomers, boomers, Gen Xers. You don't do that. And unless you're just having fun, unless you're just observing things about them, poking fun at people and some of their attributes, that's fine. However, if the whole Zoomers are lazy, millennials are lazy, boomers are out of touch and can't use computer. Don't do that, right? Don't do that, right? Don't pick on age groups, right? That's my advice. Don't pick on the younger kids. Don't pick on the old ones, right? Just don't, right? Just let people be. But that said, I'm very, very lucky that I'm as old as I am, because I feel like what the younger generation has been through in terms of the lockdowns, in terms of economic destitution is really unfair. But one theme that I have seen, it's a very, very common thing, is that there is a state of being that many people have been reduced to in this generation that I call like a permatine existence, where they're living with their parents. They may have a job, but it's not enough to really live on their own. And so they kind of are dependent on their parents. And that in and of itself reduces them to a certain mentality. And it's not that they're immature. I'm not calling these folks immature. It's that they don't have the dignity of adulthood. When you're living in the household of somebody else, right, who you are dependent on, they have power over you, and you don't have a certain level of agency, right? You are kind of subservient to that person. That person is still making decisions for you. Now, maybe when you're 25, they're not telling you, when you can come in and where you can go, and et cetera, but they still have power over you if you're still living with them, right? And when you're living in someone else's household, that very, very much it prevents you from getting fully adult in your mindset, because you're not having ownership fully over your life. And the culture in a lot of ways very much reflects that. It used to be that, getting really, really into Star Wars or Star Trek, that was a teenage boy thing. Now, that has become very much, just a thing that people of all ages do, right? It used to be that certain things that we considered to be like young man things are just part of what men in general do, or girls in general, or young people in general. I can speak more to the male experience than the female experience, but there is kind of a permateen aspect that I'm seeing where these younger folks are not paying their own bills. They're not out on their own. And it's because of economic conditions. They would like to be out on their own in a lot of cases, in most cases, but they're not able to be. And so that prevents them from really taking on an adult mentality. And so, they're kind of stuck in a teen way of being. So that's a tragedy. I believe everyone should have the dignity of adulthood. By the time you're 25, 30 years old, you should have your own home where you can do whatever you want, where you don't have to ask anyone's permission about where to go. And that's just a basic part of development, and that you gain more wisdom and insight by having that, and that not having that dignity because of economic circumstances really deprives you of being fully human. Right. And it's not these younger folks' fault. It's economic conditions have evolved to the point that they really can't get themselves into a situation where they're fully self-reliant. And it's infuriating that this has happened to them. And the sad thing about this is that generally society, even though we might vaguely acknowledge that times are harder, society generally just assumes there's something wrong with them, right? Something wrong with you, right? You aren't out on your own. You haven't, quote, gotten your life together. You are a screw up. And it very much individualizes it, right? When if you look statistically, it's quite massive. There are a lot of young people in their 20s who are not out on their own, and it sucks. There are a lot of young people in their 30s who are not out on their own, and it sucks. And they should be, and they should have the ability to be, right? But our society has deteriorated to the point that is not the case. And yet that comes with a huge amount of shame. That said, and then in addition to pointing out the permateen existence as a problem where these young people, robbed of the dignity of adulthood, are reduced to kind of a permateen existence, there is another problem that develops, which I have seen so many times. So many times I've seen this. And I look at my life and how things have developed, and I think I dodged a bullet. There were things in my life that were quite difficult when I was in my late teens and early 20s, but they enabled me to never get into a certain trap, right? When I was a young man, me and my father, we did not get along with each other. And I was very happy to go out on my own. And also I was very, very committed. And there were times I didn't have enough food. And there were times I was in very, very bad circumstances, but I was never going to move back in with my parents. That just wasn't even an option. It wasn't even considered. And those are very unique situations. And at the time, it was quite unpleasant for me, right? Selling my blood plasma and, struggling the way I did when I was in my early 20s was not pleasant. But it got me into a circumstance where I was never, as an adult, fully dependent. There are times where I got help from somebody or somebody else, and I do, no one's a self-made man. Let me just point this out there too. Nobody gets by in this world without support from other people, right? Whether it's your parents, whether it's good friends or whatever, everybody in this world, for the most part, gets bailed out by somebody, gets supported by somebody. Everybody does, right? Everybody does. We made a big deal. It's been made, a lot was made out of the fact that Donald Trump, as a billionaire, wealthy capitalist, he got support from his father. Well, he's not the only one. And, I know very few people that would be able to survive in the world if their parents hadn't helped them out, or if a friend hadn't bailed them out in tough times. And so as much as, yes, Donald Trump grew up in a relatively privileged position as somebody from a very wealthy background, the idea that his father financially helped him to succeed in business, that's true for everyone in business. That's true for everyone in this world. Very few people out there would have been able to have successful careers and get where they have if somebody hadn't helped them up, help them up. Right now, if you're super wealthy and you're a real estate person, that comes in the form of loans of millions of dollars. And if you're a working class person just trying to make it on your own, that comes in the forms of your parents co-signing your student loans, or helping you to get a mortgage for your house. But people get help. No one is a self-made man. Let me just get that right out there. No one's all made by themselves. No, we all got help. And I got help, and I'm very grateful to those who've helped me out over the years. Sometimes that help has come from very strange places, but I'm grateful for it, and you should be too. And this notion that we're all just independent and all of that, that's an illusion. But that said, there's a certain problem I see with people my age that didn't happen to me because it just wasn't an option. But people my age and younger, and I've seen this so many times, is that they live at home. They're in their 20s, they're in their 30s, they're living at home, and they have a parent who doesn't want them to go out on their own. Now, this is something, right? It's not obvious at first, but as you get to know these folks, they have a parent, and that parent is usually quite emotionally abusive to them, is usually putting them down for the fact that they're still economically dependent, saying, why don't you get your life together? You're a screw up. And in fact, this parent loves to bombard their child with the fact that I pay for you, I financially support you, you're a screw up, you rely on me, I'm always having to cover. The parent constantly hits them with that. But at the same time, if that child ever starts to move in the direction of their career taking off or getting a good paying job to be out on their own, that parent panics. Because that parent likes this dynamic. They become almost dependent on they like having a relationship where they have leverage. That's what they like. They like having a relationship where they have leverage over their child, right? Their child lives with them, is their constant companion, and is reliant on them. So they have the power, and they love that kind of dynamic. And often this parent is a very depressed person, is a very lonely person, has their own emotional problems, and so they don't have anyone else. And their child is like their captive. They're captive. I mean, they're always there, living with them, always there, reliant on them, and that child is like their captive. And they have that power over their child. They have the upper hand. They have the money. They're paying the bills. The child can't survive out on their own, and that makes the relationship very, very easy. It's far easier to be friends or to be friends with somebody you have power over than to be friends with someone who's an equal, who can just walk out the door and say, you're an asshole, see ya. They don't want that. They like this power dynamic that develops. And so they emotionally abuse the child, right? The adult child, right? Constantly run them down, constantly make them feel less. And they work very, very hard to sabotage any possibility of them getting out on their own. In fact, this kind of toxic parent will panic if there's just a friendship that develops, right? If this adult child starts to develop real friends, starts to go out and do real things in the world, starts to go on trips, etc., they panic. Oh my God, my child might go and get a real job someday and not have to be reliant on me. And I have seen this so many times, right? And this is a dynamic that is very widespread in our society at this time, of the narcissistic or abusive parent, so to speak, who doesn't want their child, or doesn't want their child to have an actual boyfriend or girlfriend, doesn't want their child to have a good paying job, doesn't want their child to become financially independent, doesn't want their child to have real friends, just wants the child to be their dependent. That will always be there for them, right? And it is toxic. And this is such a widespread problem among American young people. I have seen this over and over and over and over. And so many of the younger folks that I know that struggle with depression, that struggle with anger issues, that struggle with it's rooted in this. It's not a chemical imbalance. I mean, there may be factors like that. It's not. It is rooted in the fact that they are stuck. They're stuck in this life circumstance where they have a parent who doesn't want them to go out on their own, who likes having them under their thumb so they can constantly tear them down as a failure, but not really let them and help them get out on their own. And it's a really, really toxic, dangerous dynamic, right? And I have seen it develop. And the saddest thing about it is that a lot of the younger people that get into this dynamic, they just can't acknowledge that it's there. They just can't acknowledge that it's there, because if they acknowledge that it's there, they will lose their mind. And so that anger, the underlying anger they have at their parent, comes out in a lot of other ways. And it comes out usually at somebody on the internet that they perceive as being a bully or a fascist or whatever, or it comes out at people in their life who are trying to be their friends, or trying to give them opportunities, right? It comes out in all kinds of different ways. But what it really is beneath the surface, they are boiling with anger at this parent that doesn't want them to be an adult and is actively sabotaging their ability to be an adult and keeping them in a position where they can be dependent and be, the object of ridicule for their dependency. And I've seen this over and over and over again. And I am not here to solve anyone's life problems. I wish I had the answer for everybody. But this is really the equivalent of like being in an abusive relationship. Right? They talk about, a husband and a wife are in a relationship and the husband is beating the wife, or, this is basically the equivalent of an abusive relationship that I see many, many young people trapped in. And it prevents them from having a real romantic partner. It prevents them from having a real job and career. It prevents them from having confidence and self-esteem. It is a trap that many young people are in. And ultimately, I hope that if you are watching this right now and you are in that circumstance, you can find the strength within yourself to get out of that relationship. And I hope that you will make good friends and you'll make good connections. You'll find a good, economic situation, and you'll be able to get out of that trap. I really hope that you'll be able to do that, because this trap is toxic, and it's where I see so many young folks stuck in this day and age. It's a toxic situation that I've seen over and over and over again. And yes, the economic crisis is behind it, right? The lack of economic opportunity is a big factor, but there's something else there. There's something else there. And that, we're in a weird time where a lot of things are changing very quickly. A lot of old rules are changing. Look, I'll tell you, the rules are constantly changing. For example, part of the reason that this YouTube channel took so long to really develop is for a long time, it wasn't really, I think, until 2020 that I started streaming. Why? I started streaming, or I started doing videos that weren't, me giving a speech somewhere in front of people. And I had it in my head that if I just looked at my camera like I'm doing right now, that would mean I'm not important, right? That would mean I'd failed as a revolutionary leader, right? And I thought that in order to be important, if I'm going to give a speech, there better be an audience in front of me. I better have a microphone in my hand and be speaking to a group of people. And for a long time, I would not post videos of just me talking, because I thought, I have to show I'm important. And if I just talk into my computer, that'll mean that I'm just some loser on the internet. I had to show I'm a great revolutionary leader. Well, that was incorrect, right? All kinds of people just talk into their computers nowadays. There's absolutely nothing wrong with just talking into your computer. And it wasn't really until 2020 that I just started streaming on this channel and just talking into my computer. Never occurred to me to do that. I actively thought, I will not do that. I've got to show that and I got over that. I got over it. I realized actually talking into your computer and just being a real person with your audience, like I'm doing right now, is very much something people like to see. People want to talk to a real person. You don't have to put on a show. And now I get on here and I do this. I haven't been on here as much because I'm traveling, but there's been times where I've done this 7 days a week, and I would like to do that as much as I can. I'd like to be on here as much as I can for you all. But it took me a while. right? Because the rules changed. At one point, yes, the internet was full of people just talking into their computers, and people thought that was dumb. And if you wanted to be a great, important person, you had to be in front. But that's not how the rules are. The rules of the game are constantly changing. YouTube, right now, YouTube is completely fucked, right? And I'm still on here. I'm still going here because I know this is an important place to talk with you all. This is an important place to engage with you all. But at one point, yeah, YouTube was bringing in a lot of money for me. I was making $2,000 a month, $1,000 a month on here, but the rules of the game changed. And now we're at the point that YouTube is full of AI crap, right? I mean, I'll be real. There's loads of AI crap all over YouTube. And it's a problem. It's a problem, but it's not a problem in the sense that it just needs to go away or we need to outlaw AI. No, it's a problem in the sense that the rules of the game have changed. The rules of the game have changed, right? And that's fine. I'm still here on YouTube. There's 120 of you watching me on YouTube. There's 22 people watching right now on Rumble. And, I get on here and I talk, right? But, it used to be that, for example, right? If the news event happened, you would make a video about that news event. A lot of people would watch it. Doesn't work that way because now whenever a news event happens, there's a bunch of AI crap videos that come out about the news event. That's an AI voice talking about the event and a bunch of images that are, fished out of, Google or whatever. And that, so if you want to make a video about a current event, forget it. Forget it. Your video, unless you have a very large channel already, your video is, mixed in with all kinds of AI crap videos about it that are just automated voices reading scripts that were written by AI about it. And that social media is now being flooded with AI stuff that is not of very high quality, that is just people trying to make money. That said, this isn't going to go away. The rules of the game are changing. The rules of the game are changing. I'm still on here. And actually, I make all my own videos. But I use AI for proofreading. When I write, I use AI for proofreading. I know Peter Coffin, when he edits videos, he uses AI for video effects, for images and things like that, right? The thing is, we can all tell what AI crap is. AI crap is uninteresting, but real art that is enhanced by AI is very good. And the ability of an artist to produce real art with, with AI as a tool is massive. And actually, I'm exploring how AI can be used to enhance the art that I do. I am not going to ever make AI crap videos on this channel. But do I use AI to enhance the work that I already do? Absolutely, I do. Right? I mean, our letter to Donald Trump that we made right after Donald Trump won the election. It was great. And we wrote it. We wrote every word of it. But then, we filmed all our members speaking about it. We found the clips and all of that. But we used AI to enhance it and make it better. Right? There was an image of the Kamala Harris book, getting burned and then coming up out of the ashes. Yeah, we used AI to enhance and make that thing. And that you can use AI as a tool to do really amazing things. Amazing things if you use it as a tool. If you use AI to just churn out crap, you'll get crap. And we're in a period that's kind of the Wild West where we're figuring where it's going to take a while before we all develop an AI crap filter, right? But AI is here to stay, and AI will make it much easier for those of us who make real art. It'll make it much easier for us to do it. We'll be able to do it quicker, to do it faster, like, for example, I used to have to hire a proofreader. I'd pay hundreds of dollars to have my works proofreaded. Now I write it, I feed it into ChatGPT, and I always say, keep the original words as much as possible. I have to put that, and it can go over and it can catch my mistakes. And then I have to read it myself to make sure, because sometimes they really love run-on sentences. They love those long run-on sentences. And there's certain things that AI does, but, I can use AI to proofread my work so that I don't have typos. And I have to pay somebody to go over it. There's various other things you can do with AI that makes that can make, if you're doing the artwork yourself, if you're expressing your real thoughts and feelings, AI can make it easier as a tool to do it. However, if you just say to AI, make me some videos, you're going to get crap, right? Write me a book, you're going to get crap, right? And so it's going to be a while before we can clearly distinguish between AI crap, and works of art that may use AI enhancement, but are not AI crap. And we're figuring it out, right? A machine cannot have a soul, but a machine can look at something with a soul and imitate it. That's what a machine can do. A machine will never have a soul, but it can look at something with a soul and study exactly how it moves and very carefully imitate it. And there's nothing wrong with that. Nothing wrong with that at all. And in fact, that makes it a lot easier for those of us with souls to create. So I am pro AI. Absolutely pro AI. However, we're in a weird Wild West period where the rules of the game have changed to some degree or other. But this is actually what Karl Marx wrote about. This is called the tendency of the falling rate of profit. This is actually, Karl Marx writes about how capitalism cannot exist without the means of production constantly being revolutionized. And for a while, only one capitalist has the new technology, but pretty soon it becomes evened out and the rate of profit overall goes down because the amount of human labor power involved in producing the product decreases. This is called the tendency of the falling rate of profit. Google it. This is a classical Marxist concept. AI is a very, very extreme version. Marx he must have known on some level that something like this would eventually happen, but it's labor being replaced by technology, labor replacing technology on a massive scale. The problem is not AI. The problem is not technology. The problem is not self-driving cars. The problem is that abundance and the abundance created by technological efficiency should lead to prosperity. Self-driving cars should be a great thing. However, under our system, self-driving cars would lead to riots in the streets and hunger. That doesn't make sense, right? What sense does that make? Well, it doesn't make sense because in our system, it is only by renting yourself out as an employee that you can provide for yourself, and that less labor power being necessary in the process of production leads to the rate of wages decreasing, the amount of money paid out to workers decreasing. But it also leads to the amount of profit the employer can make off each item they produce also decreasing. And so we have a situation where human creativity and brilliance and our ability to reduce the necessary human labor with technology, which should be a great thing, leads to a greater economic crisis. Poverty created by abundance. Poverty amid plenty. This is the critique of capitalism that Karl Marx had. I am so tired. This is why I don't call myself a communist anymore. I do not call myself a communist because Karl Marx wrote all about the problems of capitalism, about how capitalism creates a crisis that in previous epochs would have been an absurdity. Poverty created by abundance, the crisis of what he called overproduction, what Peter Coffin calls value crisis. This problem of people being homeless because there are too many houses, of people being hungry because there is too much food. This has never existed before, right? And this is the problem with capitalism, that capitalism has created a situation where we can have more abundance than ever before, and as a result, everyone gets poorer and there's more poverty. That doesn't make sense. Poverty created by great wealth. Poverty created by abundance. And the problem with modern communists is none of them ever talk about this. None of them talk about this. None of them. Some of the communists, they talk about how some people are employers and some people are employees, and that's no fair. That's what they talk about. Did Marx talk about that? Yes. But is that the essence of what he was talking about? No. A lot of people, they talk about income inequality. income inequality. Some people make more money than others. They talk about racism being bad. Well, is racism bad? Sure, right? And Karl Marx said, labor in white skin cannot itself be free when labor in black skin is branded. But again, that's not the essence of what he was talking about, right? That there's all kinds of other crap. People that call themselves communists, they talk about all kinds of crap. They talk about workers and employers, and they talk about racism, and they talk about the traditional family and sexism, and they talk about white people and settlers and Native Americans, and they talk about all kinds of crap. None of them talk about the fact that human beings have the ability to constantly reinvent our mode of production. And that, first we were hunter-gatherers, and then we moved from hunter-gatherer civilization to slavery, and then we moved from slavery to feudalism, and then out of feudalism came capitalism, and that each time we move to a higher mode of production, our ability to produce goods vastly increases. You produce a lot more food by growing it and domesticating animals than you do by hunting and gathering. You produce a lot more goods with a factory than you do with an individual craftsman who makes it all by himself, right? And that we are constantly increasing our productive capacity. Human beings have the ability to create wealth better than ever, and we are constantly becoming more productive. We are constantly doing that, which no other species can do, and that we have, at this point, an economic system, the industrial system, right? The capitalist industrial system, which has moved into its monopolistic stage of imperialism, and that system is not compatible with the level of efficiency that we now have. If you have 3D printers, right? If you've got Amazon create a page and a book comes out, you push a button and a book comes out. If you've got AI that can paint paintings and play chess better than humans can, you can't have a system where production is organized simply to maximize profit for private owners. You can't have the anarchy of production or the chaos of the market. You've got to transcend it. No communists are talking about that. That's what Marx was talking about, but none of them are talking about that. None of them. I can guarantee you. If someone says, hello, I am a communist, they are not talking about this. They're talking about workers and bosses and how we need to, have the factory be a co-op. Well, that co-op still operates according to profit, and it's still got the same problem. And the fewer workers in that co-op, the bigger share everyone's going to get. And you still have all the same problems, right? If you talk to communists, they're talking about America as an evil, racist society. Well, no, America is a society born in a revolution against the British Empire. America is a society that very much was reinvented with the Civil War, the Second American Revolution. America is the home of all kinds of progressive revolutionary organizers like John Brown, like Harriet Tubman, like Frederick Douglass, like Eugene Debs and Gus Hall. I mean, America is not an evil, racist society. America is a society that is part of an economic global system of globalism, imperialism, that is leading to wars all over the world. America was born in slavery and primitive accumulation, and America has all kinds of problems. But the people here are not evil. The society here is not evil. It's just cursed. It's stamped by bad things from our past. There are contradictions that must be worked out. But then no communists talk like that. Anyone in America who calls themselves a communist, it is an expression of they want to show everyone that they're wrong, everyone else is wrong, and I'm right. I live in America, and being a communist is a bad thing in America, so I'm going to be a communist to show you all that you're wrong and I'm right. Good for you. Good for you. They want to rebel. They want to wave the red flag, and they want barricades and guns and killing and guillotines and all that. And that's just, I'm sorry, I very much believe in the economic understanding of Karl Marx of the problem of value crisis, overproduction, the tendency of the falling rate of profit. I understand what Lenin wrote about in his book Imperialism, the highest stage of capitalism, about the monopolistic position of big banks, and about also the understanding that Henry Charles Carey had about the English system versus the American system, and the oligarchical system of the British Empire. And I understand what Alexander Dugin, the great Russian philosopher, is talking about with his conception of Atlanticism and the empires of the sea and thalassocracy versus Eurasian and continental systems. And again, I understand all of this. And Marx and Lenin and Stalin are a big part of understanding where the new world that is arising came from, right? I'm telling you, the Houthis, they are not communists at all. They are very, very religious. They're Muslims. They are very much anti-communist and all of that. But there would be no Houthi movement if there wasn't Stalin, right? And the Iranians, they're very, very much anti-communist. They are Muslims. They reject Marxism. But there would be no Islamic revolution if it wasn't for Lenin and Stalin. And, all over the world in the 20th century, you had the birth of various anti-colonial movements that came into existence because of the Soviet Union. Because the first thing that the Soviet Union did was they sponsored the Congress of the Peoples of the East, and they offered military aid to anyone who was fighting the British Empire, fighting the imperialist West. And they gave aid to the Egyptian merchants, capitalists who were fighting against the British Empire. They gave aid to the Emir of Afghanistan, a conservative monarchist in Afghanistan who was fighting the British Empire. And meanwhile, they had no problem waging war against various socialists in Europe. And they said that social democracy, the welfare state, the aristocracy of labor was an essential part of this imperialist system that they wanted to oppose. You would never have had World War I without socialists, without fake socialists, without the AOC and Bernie Sanders of the 19-teens. There would never have been a World War I. Right? There never would have been a First World War without the British Labour Party. There never would have been a First World War without various fake socialist leaders like Samuel Gompers, who led the AFL in the United States. And there never would have been such a thing, right? Fake socialists, social democracy is an essential part of imperialism. Liberals, welfare states, labor union bosses. This is an essential part of what makes imperialism work. And that was an understanding that the Bolsheviks had. And with that understanding, they broke the Soviet Union out of the Western system, and they gave aid to various anti-colonial movements. And over the course of the 20th century, all these anti-colonial movements started to change, and the Soviet Union itself fell and eventually fell. And there was a rise of all kinds of various anti-colonial movements, Ba'athist Arab socialism, Islamic Shia revolutionary stuff in the Middle East, Bolivarianism in Latin America, and there's all kinds of stuff happening in the world. But all of that came on the foundation of what Marx and Lenin did, but it kept growing. It kept growing. And whereas what calls itself communism in the West takes the aesthetic of what Marx and Lenin did, the red flag, the hammer sickle, a lot of it comes from the French Revolution, doesn't even come from Marx. It predates Marx. The revolutionary intelligentsia of Europe, the radicalism, the rage, the anti-populism, the whatever, anti-authoritarianism. They take that, and that's all they've got. And if you actually understand the economics of what Marx was for, you can also start to criticize some of his spiritual conceptions, dialectical materialism, ruthless criticism of all in existence, all that stuff. You can start to understand that, what started with Lenin and the Bolsheviks and this new anti-colonial world that's emerging with the BRICS and with the Shanghai Cooperation Organization and the Axis of Resistance in the Middle East and the Eurasian Economic Union and the Bolivarian alternative of Latin America. This is something new, and it's something new and exciting. But the foundation of it is overcoming the narrow horizon of bourgeois right, overcoming the irrationality of profits and command. They have rationally organized economies, so they are not held back by the tendency of the falling rate of profit. They're not held back by the irrationality of the market. They are able to grow and expand without gluts of overproduction and out these kind of problems. And if you can understand that, and you can get excited about this new economy that's not held back by the limitations of production organized for profit, you can realize that we are in a new stage. And this new stage that we are in is not about the factory worker versus the factory owner. It is about the struggle of human creativity to break free from the artificial restrictions imposed by the market and enabling human society to rationally grow and unleash productive forces so we can move toward a world where abundance, vast material abundance, is created to the point that we don't need a government, to the point that there's no inequality because there's just enough for everybody. There's just enough for everybody. Look, you can't create inequality with force. And this is what we've learned very tragically, right? I think Mao did a lot of great things in fighting the Japanese colonialists and building modern China, but the Cultural Revolution was a disaster because during the Cultural Revolution, they were trying to create equality in poverty. China was a very poor country, a very poor country. And they were hoping that with willpower and with force, they could make China equal and have a higher stage in poverty, have egalitarianism in poverty. You can't do that. Pol Pot tried to do that in Cambodia, and he said they didn't have industry, they were an agrarian country, but he said, you know what? We're going to make everybody equal in poverty. You can't do that, right? And Che Guevara, brave, heroic anti-colonial fighter, did amazing things, but his years managing the Cuban economy in the early 60s was not good. He tried to build socialism and build an economy in Cuba with no material incentives, no rewards for working harder. It didn't work. You can't create equality in poverty, and you cannot create equality by forcing it. The road to equality is abundance. When there's enough for everybody, no one has to hoard. When there's enough to go around, everyone's pretty much equal. That is the basis for equality. The only way you can get equality is with abundance. Scarcity necessitates inequality and necessitates hierarchy. Equality and egalitarianism are the result of abundance. Capitalism, the mode of production, where profit is in command, cannot create the level of abundance that is needed because of the irrationality of the market. So we need a government of action to control the economy and smash the oligarchs so that the productivity can be unleashed. We need a government that will break the power of the big banks and break the power of the big oil companies and control and rationally organize the economy so we can unleash human creativity and create the level of abundance to bring about true freedom. That is what we need. We need a government of action that will fight for working families. We need a government of action that will fight for working families. That is what we ultimately need. We need a popular state, an authoritarian state that will battle and smash the oligarchy, that will break the power of the oligarchy, and will organize the economy to unleash human creative power. And in order to do that, you have to displace the power of the oligarchy. So if you want to fight oligarchy, the road is not weakening the institution of the presidency. And the road is not, at this point, the road is not, weakening and opposing authoritarianism. The road is building up a popular power and a popular movement that is at odds with the oligarchy and is willing to use state power to break their will and to have a pro-growth state. Right now we have a state that holds back growth, a state that crushes small business owners, a state that breaks people's dreams and impoverishes people. We need a pro-growth state. We need to invest in human beings. If human beings don't have jobs, they're not going to be productive. We should utilize all human labor power. Every person who's unemployed should get hired and put to work paving the roads of this country. The roads of America are falling apart, and there's all kinds of people unemployed. Hire them and have them pave the roads. That's what Roosevelt did. Works for me, right? Hire the unemployed to build new power plants so the power grid isn't falling apart in Texas and in California, and we're not having blackouts all the time and wildfires. Hire the unemployed. Put them to work doing the useful work to lay the basis for physical economy. Build power plants. Build hospitals. Build water treatment facilities. Build high-speed railway. Utilize human labor power to build. Second, our natural resources, our oil, our gas, our coal, and our timber should be public property. And the profit, the wages, the money, the revenue created by our natural resources should go into the public budget. The burden of taxation should be taken off of the population. We shouldn't have to pay taxes. We should get money. To pay for our schools and our hospitals from our natural resources. Third, banking. The lending of money should be done strategically in the interest of an overall economic plan to stimulate growth. The banks should be directed and controlled by society. And they should lend money based on the interests of the community. We should have a plan as a country, what we want to do to make sure the economy grows, and the banks should be lending money based on that, not based on what banks do currently. The purse strings, the credit should be controlled rationally by central planners. And in addition to that, we need an economic bill of rights. We need to start investing in our people, right? If we want to have a strong economy, we're going to need a lot of working people that are healthy. So that means providing health care. We're going to have a strong economy. We're going to need smart people, engineers, scientists, doctors, lawyers. We're going to need smart people. So we're going to provide education. We're going to have a strong economy. We're going to have to have housing. We're going to have decent food, not just food itself, but good food that is healthy, that makes people stronger. We're going to need to invest in our population, not as a handout. That's what Bernie and AOC are out there in LA talking about today. We give corporations lots of free things, so I think we should give lots of lazy pot-smoking Americans free things also. If corporations can get millions of dollars for doing nothing, you should get millions of dollars for sitting around and doing nothing also. Well, that's not what I believe. He's got a point. It's true. It is totally unfair that, if you sit on your couch and the government gives you something, you're lazy, and that's a handout. And if the corporation does absolutely nothing or makes life worse in the country and they get a handout, that's whatever. But that's not the answer. We need to view the state as investing in the population. If we provide education, we're not giving somebody a handout. We're investing in that person. If we provide health care to somebody, we shouldn't be viewing it as a handout. We should be viewing it as investing. Human labor power and human creativity are the source of all wealth in this world. Let me repeat that. Human labor power and human creativity is the source of all wealth in this world. Aside from natural resources, all wealth comes from that. Right? And so if you want to have wealth in society, you need to heavily invest in human labor power. You need to make people so that they're healthy, strong, smart, productive people so they can generate lots of wealth. We don't have an economy based on real wealth that comes from human labor power, that comes from human creativity. We have an economy based on speculation, rip-off schemes, a Wall Street gambling casino. That's called fictitious capital. We need to get rid of fictitious capital. That's what we need. We need to get rid of fictitious capital, and we need a physical economy, an economy about growth, an economy about expanding productive forces, an economy about making great technological breakthroughs and expanding the amount of wealth in society. We need physical economy, not fictitious capital. That is what we need. And, that's what we're for. And we call this innovationism. And you can go to our website and read it for free. We've got this whole book explaining what we're about. What is innovationism? It's not that long, right? It's less than 100 pages. It's 89 pages long. You will learn all about what is innovationism. Go to the website. You can read it for free, right? Or you can order copies of it. We've got hundreds of copies. They've got copies in Chicago. They've got copies around the country. This book has now been translated into Spanish. Thank you, Penny. Shout out to Penny, who just translated it into Spanish. There's going to be a Spanish edition of this book available shortly because Penny just did the hard work. This is our viewpoint. This is the innovationist worldview, and this is the cutting edge of anti-imperialism, anti-globalism. Everyone who's MAGA, they really want this. Everyone who's a socialist or a Bernie-crat or a communist, they really want this. This is the real deal, folks. This is all, this is, how do I put this? This is a real cupcake. It is not all frosting. This is a real amazing cupcake. Right? There's a lot of frosting out there, but this is a real cupcake beneath the frosting. This is the real deal. This is the real deal. This is the real solution. Everyone who's on the right, this is what you want. You want to fight globalism and imperialism? This is what you want. If you're on the left and you want to fight the oligarchy and the big monopolies, etc., this is what you want. This is the real deal. Innovationism is the real deal. Innovationism is the new stage. And we view ourselves as a movement that is about making you better. We want you to be more creative. We want you to be more productive. We want you to innovate. That is what we want to do. And we want to help you find the psychological place, the comrades, the brothers and the sisters who can help you innovate and create. That's what we're trying to do. We are building a community. You want to find happiness in this world? There are two ways of doing it. One, loving, connecting with other people, finding real companionship, connecting and growing and loving others. That's one way that you can be happy. The second way is to create, to reinvent the world around you, to build, to construct, to take the world around you and make it better, to create. Those are the two ways to find happiness. And we at the Center for Political Innovation are creating a community that is intended to help you do both of those things. We want you to find brotherhood and sisterhood and community, and we want you to work with your brothers and sisters to build, to create, to innovate and construct. And that is what we are aiming to do. And that is why we exist. We are the innovationist movement. We are a new stage. Communism is the past. Communism is the past, right? Laid the foundation for a lot, but there's also issues there. And there's, we're doing something new and exciting. Innovationism is the cutting edge. And we're really, really glad to have you here with us and that to have you walk down this road with us. We are really, really happy. We're really, really, really happy to have you walk this road with us. It's really, really great. So thanks for being here. And I'm willing to now answer any questions that folks have, except I don't see any, right? I don't think we've received any Rumble rants, and we have not received any super chats. And no one has sent me. Now, the way to get me to answer questions, right, is to send a Rumble rant on Cash App, or to Caleb Moppin 22, or a Rumble rant on Rumble. So this is how I can answer your question. So if you got a question, this is how to send it to me. I've said what I wanted to say for tonight, but let's do the roll call. And then from there, I'll answer any questions that people might have. I am a bit tired because it's been a long day. But yeah, let's do the roll call and we'll go from there. Who's with us tonight? Names and locations, folks. Names and locations. We got April and Chris in Salt Lake City. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Are you coming to the convention, April and Chris? Are you coming to Chicago? There's one thing you come to this year. It's got to be this. So I really hope that you'll join us. It's going to be the biggest event of the year. Very, very good. Bob. Phil in Miami, Florida. Bob in Troy, New York. Lawrence Johnson in Chicago. Deha in Seattle. Jenny in Cincinnati. Scott in Maryland. Rochester, Minnesota. Peter is in the house. Very, very good. Binghamton, New York. Priest of Hiroshima, New Jersey. Ian in Chester, England. Courtney in Northern Virginia. Alex in Brazil. Patch in Arizona. Mariah in North Carolina. Great dancing on the part of your relative there. David in San Jose, California. Alyssa in Virginia. Nakamoto in North Carolina by way of Yugoslavia. Very, very good. Devin in Western Virginia. Occupied territory of Texas. Very, very good. Anybody else? Cali, Mohican D in Cali. Welcome, Cali. Cali, California. Nat in Vancouver, Washington. Wish I could get to Chicago. You can find a way, right? Jalea is not that far away, but it's not that soon either. So find a way. Find a way because we need you there. It'll be the biggest event of the year, the biggest anti-imperialist event by far. JT24 in Mississippi. St. David's, Bermuda. Names and locations. Who is with us? Ottawa, the Russian Ballet of Ottawa. Be there. You don't want to miss it. 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 But yeah, I will take any questions that people have. Rumble, Rant, or Cash App, Caleb Moppin 22. Also, if you want to help, right now, as we speak, there are people in Chicago at the Palestine Film Festival distributing these books. Right now, they are distributing them. They are handing them to people who are attending the Palestine Film Festival. They may have already finished. I don't know. But on the back, there's a poster, and we're using this to build. We are building building. So yeah, it's going to be very, very good. Very, 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 very good. So, right. Very, very good. Very, very good. Just looking at a few chats. Yeah. So, yeah. Any questions that people might have? Oh, whoa, there you go. Any questions that people might have, that would be good. And, look, I'm glad to check in with all of you. I know this is an important thing to do. And I mean, around the country, we had a great meeting today. 21 people were on the call today talking about building. There's people driving in from Kentucky. There's people driving in from Minneapolis, Minnesota. There's people driving in from the Quad Cities area. There's people driving in from Missouri, from different parts of Missouri, from both ends of Missouri. People are driving in. And people are doing outreach like crazy in Chicago. We just had a great event in Chicago, great weekend of getting the ball rolling, meeting with different communities. I'm very excited. Mark from Utica, Sarah from Oregon. Yeah. And it's really great what we're doing as the Center for Political Innovation. I really think it is very exciting. I'm exhausted, like I told you all. I've been on the road. Shout out to my wife, by the way. She had a great victory today. She did something very, very great. Some community efforts that she's involved in. Don't want to say too much about it, but I'm very proud of her for what she did. She had a very successful day, something she'd been working very, very hard on, worked out. So give a shout out to Mrs. Maupin. She deserves a high five and a pat on the shoulder. She had a great achievement in her life today. Yeah, I am exhausted and I have to get on a bus and head back to DC again tomorrow. I'm going to church in the morning and then I'm getting on a bus. That's the way life goes, right? And I'm doing important stuff. You'll see some of the stuff I'm doing. I was shout out to somebody who helped me edit some video, and I'm going to go over their edits and you're going to see what I've been working on. I don't want to lay it all on you just yet. Oh, here's a new development. My book is now available. My latest book is, I've been told you, there's a chapter of it that was published on the website. This book is now available. You can order your copy of Khrushchevism, a study in psychological warfare. And that is not the cover. That is the wrong cover. Sorry about that. I will get you the actual cover. That was an earlier draft of the cover. Let me show you the cover of my book, right? It's great. I am very, very, very happy with this book that has been published. And I'm proud of this book. I put a lot of work into this book. Here is the book. Khrushchevism, a study in psychological warfare. The book is well over 200 pages. It's not a full 300 pages, but it's getting there. And it's a lot of research that I did over the years. One of the issues that I've had lately in writing books is that we've had a problem with the fact that that my books, they can't be they draw on previous knowledge. So I work hard for them all to be standalone pieces. Like if you never read anything else I had ever written, and you could read this book and you would make sense of it. And so because of that, I have to repeat myself a lot sometimes. But in this book, I laid out a number of new concepts. I got into the history of the Soviet Union, got into the history of anti-imperialist groups, and I talked about the tank and tank propaganda. I talked about statue toppling propaganda. I talked about George Orwell. I talked about Jerry Healy. I talked about all of that. I talked about all of this in the book. And this is a book mainly about the struggle of building anti-imperialist organizations and how Khrushchev and his secret speech devastated the global communist movement. And that's what it's about. But I use that to make a lot of very, 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 very important points. The book is now available. So order your copy today. You will like it. order your copy today. I am, I'm also working on some other little projects that I'll tell you about later. But yeah, this is, these are exciting times. So, but yeah, order your copy of the book. You will like it. You will like it. So that said, I see that there are 2 Rumble rants that have come in, one from Deha and one from Violent Fembot. That's an interesting name, Violent Fembot. It's clever. I like it. I think I know I think that's somebody we know, but I forget who. But whoever you are, Violent Fembot, I appreciate your name. So before I answer that, I usually put some music on. That's part of our tradition here, is that I put some music on. So I'm going to put some music on. If you got any more super chats, Rumble rants, you can either Cash App me, Caleb Moffin 22, with a question, or you can Rumble rant me a question. But before we do that, I will put some music on. I just have to figure out what music that is. That'll give you a chance. When I put the music on, that will give you a chance. That'll give you a chance to ask your question. So let's see. Let me see if I have a piece of music already. I might have a piece of music that I can play already. Okay. Just looking through the music to find something that we can play. All right. I think I have to. Okay. All right. So I think the piece of music that I want to play is it's a historic song. And so I've told you all many times, they never teach you this history. There's always a much more interesting story behind anything. I was a kid in the 90s, and in the 90s, there was the show that was popular. It was the X-Files, right? About 2 FBI agents who were going around, looking for government secrets or something like that. And there was kind of a revival of UFO interest in the 90s. It was just kind of a 90s thing. People talked about UFOs, and there was the X-Files, right? And people did that, it was like the, whatever. It was a thing people did in the 90s. They thought about UFOs, and we all kind of made fun of people who believe in UFOs, and that was just part of the 90s. The UFO thing goes back to 1947. 1947 is when the word flying saucer, the term flying saucer, originated. Right after World War II, there was a very widespread phenomenon of UFO sightings, and it was kind of an episode of, World War II had happened; it was over. The Cold War was getting going. We were very afraid of the Soviet Union, and because of that, there was widespread paranoia, and people started seeing flying saucers, and a lot of times, there were a couple early incidents that we still don't exactly know what was going on. A lot of these people were just hallucinating, though. In some cases, it was a weather balloon, but in a lot of cases, people were just hallucinating. But there were a couple early instances where we don't really know what was going on, and there's rumors and stuff like that. But at the time, there was a bluegrass hit song, gospel bluegrass hit song about flying saucers. Because no one said these flying saucers were aliens, right? That's just something they made up in movies or whatever. And then Hollywood ran with that. And now if you hear UFO, you think, oh boy, little green men, aliens. Nobody knew what this was, right? Apparently there was a lot of Baptists and Christians who thought it represented the end times coming. So this was a hit bluegrass country gospel song about the flying saucers from this time period that has been recorded by many people. It was a hit song at the time. I think it's awesome. And it's like a piece of Americana. This is a performance of Pray to the Lord When You See the Flying Saucers. So here we go. Hit song from 1947. This is someone performing it.
I have a slide. You better pray to the Lord when you see those flying saucers. It might be the coming of Judgment Day. It's a sign, there's no doubt of the trouble that's about. So I say, my friend, you better start to pray. When you see a saucer fly like it coming through the sky, you should realize the price you'll have to pay. You better pray to the Lord when you see those flying saucers. Might be the coming of Judgment Day. Now many people think the saucers might be someone's foolish dream. Maybe they were sent down here from Mars. If you just stop and think, you realize just what it means. They're more than atom bombs, they're falling stars. And though the war may be through, there's regrets and trouble brewing, and those flying saucers may be just a sign that if peace doesn't come, it'll be the end of some. So repent today, you're running out of time. They're a terrifying sight as they fly on day and night. It's a warning that we'd better mend our ways. You better pray to the Lord when you see the flying saucers. Might be the coming of the Judgment Day. Get your thoughts. Now many people think saucers might be someone's foolish dream. Maybe they were sent down here from Mars. If you just stop and think, you realize that's what it means. They're more than atom bombs, they're falling stars. And though the war may be through, there's this sense of trouble brewing, and those flying saucers may be just a sign that if peace doesn't come, it'll be the end of soon. So repent today, you're running out of time. They're a terrifying sight as they fly all day and night. It's a warning that we better mend our ways. You better pray to the Lord when you see the flying saucers. Might be the coming of the Judgment Day.
So there you go. That was Guy Forsyth performing Flying Saucers. So now I'm going to answer the two Rumble rants that have come in. Deha says, your take on AI is great. Too much fear-mongering, and the left doesn't offer solutions. How can innovationists frame AI as a tool for growth and revolution? Well, really, I am all about innovation, and I'm all about people finding new angles and all of that, but you really don't have to. This is all just basic, right? Labor-saving technology, human labor being replaced by technology, the tendency of the falling rate of profit, the problem of abundance creating poverty. This is all the stuff that is like the basis of Marxian economics that no one talks about. And I've seen the clips where they asked Sansara Taylor, a leader of the Revolutionary Communist Party, what does Marxism say about AI? And she said, I don't know. I'm thinking, how do you not know? How do you not know? This is very, very, very basic stuff. This is pretty basic. Pretty basic stuff. But, this is all basic. You just have to explain that abundance should lead to greater wealth. You should explain that, human labor produces all wealth, and that the employer can only extract surplus value from human labor. So with AI replacing jobs, the result is, less surplus value being extracted. I mean, you have to just get into the basics, and you have to explain this stuff. And the reason that it's hard, I believe, and the reason we have to stop calling ourselves communists, and the reason we call ourselves innovationists, is because nobody wants to learn anything, especially not communists, right? No one becomes a communist because they want to learn anything. They want to show everyone how smart they are. But demagogues don't teach people anything. They just appeal to people's emotions. And that there's a lot of people who don't want to learn anything. Well, if you're gonna understand why this problem exists and why AI is leading to an economic crisis, you have to learn. You have to teach people stuff. It's pretty basic. So, yeah, we just have to teach people all of this. And we've got the book, What is Innovationism? All right, free on the website. And we're putting on our seminars and our classes, and we're having our conferences. And we just have to do the hard work of teaching these concepts to people. That's what we got to do. Right? And anyone who can innovate new ways to teach it with art projects and, booklets or workshops or outreach, I'm all for it. But and I tell people, CPI, we're an education project. And that's what we exist to do. We exist to educate people. We're not a party. We got people that are members of different parties. That's fine. We're not a religion. We're just an education project. We are on a mission to educate people about the problems of imperialism and about why we need to unleash human creativity. So, yeah, we just have to teach people the basics. And so, we got these books, we got classes coming up, we got all kinds of stuff. You need to get involved in this community. You need to spread the word. So, Violent Fembot said, what do you think of Netanyahu trying to bait Iran into a conflict by claiming they need to adopt a Libya model for denuclearization? Do you think Trump will comply? And what about Putin's role? Okay. Well, there's a lot there. So, first of all, Iran doesn't have nuclear weapons. They might get them if they feel they have no choice, but at this point, they don't have them. So Libya, they never had nuclear weapons. They did have, they were trying to possibly get them, and they were developing some other things, and then they gave that up as a result of cooperating with the USA during the War on Terror. And Netanyahu doesn't want peace with Iran. That's the last thing he would ever want, is peace or negotiations with Iran. He needs Iran to be there, to be the existential threat. And Netanyahu's going to be out of power in Israel as soon as the shooting stops. And he knows that. As soon as the violence and the war, as soon as there's a slowdown in Israeli politics, he's out of there. And he's trying to save his career by prolonging this crisis. That said, we need reconciliation. We need a situation to exist where Iran is not being threatened and sanctioned by the West. Iran has the support of Russia and others, and we need a situation where Iran doesn't feel they have to develop nuclear weapons, and that where Iran's right to peaceful nuclear energy is protected. Iran has the right to peaceful nuclear energy. The USA has admitted that. It's in the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. You are allowed to engage in peaceful nuclear energy. And Iran has never proliferated nuclear weapons. They could if they wanted to. And they've made that clear at this point because they're facing a massive threat right now. And that if they wanted to change their policy, they could. At the moment, they're in full compliance with the Non-Proliferation Treaty. But they should have the right. We don't want Iran to get nuclear weapons. That would be bad. All right. And this is where it all gets very complicated. There's people who get very angry with me. And there's a whole cancel campaign going on against Scott Ritter. Look, I got to tell you, the state is very, very interesting. They're doing a lot of games, right? Scott Ritter is probably, let me put it this way. Scott Ritter is one of the most important, if not the most important, anti-imperialist voices right now. He is a weapons inspector, a former weapons inspector. He understands the nuclear armaments and spoke up against the Iraq War, has talked about Russia. Scott Ritter is really important. there is a very sophisticated operation going on against Scott Ritter. Very, very sophisticated, where they're trying to get anti-imperialists to denounce Scott Ritter because he's saying that Iran should not develop nuclear weapons. Now, the guy's a former weapons inspector. The guy has dedicated his life to preventing nuclear war in World War III. And based on his assessment, he's saying if Iran should negotiate. They should negotiate a situation that doesn't escalate any further. He has the absolute right to say that. Iranians are speaking up. Revolutionary, anti-imperialist Iranians are speaking up. Every Russian voice that I know is speaking up. There's nothing wrong with him saying that. But they're trying to manipulate anti-imperialist circles. They have a lot of weird anonymous bots and troll accounts that are trying to cancel Scott Ritter, right? And it is a sophisticated operation. Put pressure on different people, do different things. And look, everyone's not going to agree on everything. Scott's not a communist. He never has been, right? Scott is a Reagan Republican. He'll tell you that. He's just very anti-imperialist, and he understands where the wars in the world are coming from and who the liars who create those wars are. I mean, that's what Scott does. And so, I mean, these people that are mad at Scott for this or that, or like, he's Scott, right? He's a U.S. Marine. He's a Reagan Republican. He's an arms inspector. Like, he's Scott. He's always been Scott. He's not saying anything different than he's ever said. But there's this game that the state is playing a lot of games right now, because I think that, look, they're always trying to find a way to divide our communities, to make those of us who are sincere toxic, to boost people that are not sincere and are phonies that will do a very bad job. They're always maneuvering, right? The imperialists are very evil in the way that they operate, right? And we have seen all kinds of stupid games in our circles where they divide people, they spread rumors, they do this and they do that. But if you look at the way things line up, if you look at the way things line up, you can see who is on the right side and who isn't. And Scott is on the right side, and that's clear, right? And there's a very sophisticated operation going on right now, to try and maneuver people against Scott. And, don't fall for it. I'm not falling for it, right? In real life, let me put it this way. In real life, you don't gain points by having a fight with somebody unnecessarily. You don't. You gain points by having alliances. Scott is an ally of anti-imperialism, and I love Scott. And look, we got to get over this social media mindset of, whenever something happens or whenever there's some kind of murky situation, I got to denounce and disavow this person. I got to throw them under the bus. Cut that crap out. All right. It's really, really old. I will tell you, and I have said this over and over again, some of the best friends and allies I've ever made are people that don't agree with me on very much. And some of the worst friends and allies I have are people who agree with me, but, there's some nitpicky disagreement, or they just, and it's about what can we get done in the real world. That's what it's about. It's not about having an intellectual contest. It's not about agreeing or disagreeing. It's about getting real stuff done. That's what it's about. It's about getting real stuff done. Scott gets real stuff done, and Scott is a friend of people who get real stuff done. And there's a lot of people can complain on the internet and complain about this and that and forget it. And the amount of weird things that I have seen, I've learned a lot in the last decade, because I've seen a lot of weird shit happen, and I've observed a lot of weird stuff, and I've been subjected to a lot of weird stuff, and I've encountered a lot of different people, and I'm starting to understand. I am starting to understand that there is a lot of games being played. There's a lot of games being played right now. And that we absolutely have to just focus on getting real shit done. That's all there is to it. We got to just focus on getting the job done. Right? I have started to develop a way of doing things where I don't even care if you're not part of getting the job done with me. You don't exist. I'm not paying attention to people who sound like me, people who are in the same spheres. If you're not part of, if you're not, part of my world, you don't deserve my attention. And there's all kinds of people out there that sound like me, that talk like me, that make similar points to what I make or whatever. That's great, good for them. And if they want to work with me, they should reach out or, cooperate in some way. And if they don't, whatever, I just don't acknowledge them at this point. And I'm done. I'm really done, right? I'm really, really done. You can make yourself part of my universe and part of my project, or you cannot, right? And we're having the biggest event that we have ever done is coming up in Chicago this summer. And right now, people are handing out books and putting things on doors and all of that. And if you want to be part of it, great, come on board. And if you don't want to be part of it, toodle-doo, not my problem. See you later. You know what I'm saying? I mean, I don't have to play games anymore. I really don't. I'm in a good position. I am able to pay my bills. I have a situation where, as weird as it is, I'm able to support myself. We've got an organization that's growing and people that are dedicated to doing what we're doing, and we're meeting new people all the time, and we don't need to fool around anymore. We really don't need to. And if I've learned anything, let me just say this. There are a lot of people out there that don't understand give and take action, that don't understand relationships. There are all kinds of people who sound like I sound that are very, very happy. They if you ask them, can you work with Caleb? They'd be very, very happy for me to work with them as long as I gained nothing from it, as long as CPI and our organization gained nothing from it, and it was only at their benefit and our expense. I've seen that over and over and over again. People, oh yeah, we want to work with you. Just let us get all the glory and all the attention, and you just do things that are convenient for us, and that's how it works. That is not how real relationships in this world work, right? If you want to build a real movement and all that, it has to be win-win, right? And you have to give some and the other some. But there are so many people that, and it's really a scarcity mindset. They don't actually want to win. They don't want to get to the masses. What they want is they want the spotlight in our little corner of the world, and this fringe, tiny wing of the world that is anti-imperialist. And they want to get all the little tiny spotlight of this fringe world, and they don't want it to expand, and they don't want to meet new people and all that. They just want to make sure that whenever people are talking about the issues we talk about or about it, that they are the ones who are in the attention. I am done with that. I'm really done with it. And I don't need that anymore. And nowadays, again, we're talking about AI and all that. We don't need this. Like, we don't. Like, what do we need that for? Right? I mean, what do we need that for? We don't need to play these games with people. We can build our own reality. We can build our own universe. Right? We don't need to. There is no reason that we need to play games with people who don't respect us. We really don't need to do that. We don't, if you want to gain by working with us and you're willing to let us gain in the process, fine. But if you want us to work for you and stop existing, we're not going to do that. If you want us to work in a way that only benefits you, I'm really tired of this. I'm really, really tired of this. I'm really tired of the main character syndrome. I'm really tired of all these young men who think they're the next Lenin, or they think they're the next Stalin, and because of that, they don't want to learn from anybody, and they don't understand how relationships are built, and they're always fronting and trying to show. I'm really tired of it. Look, we got a job to do. We need to get the job done. It's an important job that really needs to get done, and we're going to do the job. And we're not going to stop doing the job. And if you want to help us do the job, and if we'd like to benefit you in the process, we might help you get a job done that you need to get job done. But we're not going to stop doing the job, and we're not going to make ourselves subservient to you, and we're going to get the job done. And it's not that hard to understand. It really isn't, right? It's pretty basic. If you had a friend and all that friend wanted you to do, was give him money and go and do things that he wanted to advance himself, would you stay friends with that person? No. I mean, relationships have to be mutual. There has to be mutual benefit involved. And there's just an endless amount of people that don't seem to understand that. They don't understand that that it's not realistic for the whole world to just stop and be in awe of you. It takes a lot of hard work to build relationships and get shit done. And a lot of people have to feel like they're benefiting from it. It can't just be you. And there's all these young men, it's young men in particular, and they have this main character syndrome, and they think it's all just going to happen. They're just going to be so cool or whatever, and then the revolutionary movement will just magically spring up around them. It doesn't work that way. It doesn't work that way. In real life, if you want people to help you, you have to help them. Win-win cooperation. Why do you think China is rising? And there's just this endless amount. And people are saying names in the chat. I'm not even talking about those names you're mentioning necessarily. I mean, this is just over and over and over. There's so many people that get into the world that we get into. They get into the world that we get into, and then it just doesn't occur to them that they should, operate in a way that would be, to other people's benefit, or that we should find common ground. And it has led me to the point where it's just like, what? I mean, I said a long time ago, no chasing after people. I mean it, right? I mean, we can do shit. We can very easily do shit, and we can do shit on our own. And if people want to help us do it, if people want to work with us, they're welcome to. But the endless amount of why should we work with you? The endless amount of, work to our benefit, but don't gain in the process. I've seen this with so many people. And then they'll sit back and they go, oh, we want unity. No, you don't want unity. No, you don't, right? If you're not willing to treat other people with respect, if somehow other people existing you feel is an affront to you, you don't want unity, right? And if you just want the spotlight for yourself, you don't want unity, right? Getting real shit done in the real world requires other people's interests being met, right? And this is pretty basic. I mean, read this in Marx, read this in Lenin. If you don't see it in real life, you can read about it. Like, people tend to operate in their own interests. And if you don't make other things in other people's interests, why should they cooperate with you? Like, it's very, very odd. I see this over and over and over again of people in our circles who are fine. They want everyone to work with them until other people would benefit in some way, until it's not all about them, right? Until it's not all about them, until it's not all only to their benefit. Like, it just never occurs to anyone that there should be win-win, that there should be cooperation or whatever. Okay, good luck. That's all I can say. Good luck. And, it's disappointing. It really is. Look, there's a lot of immaturity. The internet, I think, is not good for people's mental health. You're all alone on the internet. It's all about anonymous bots and likes. And look, I was telling you all about how on the internet there's a huge amount of AI crap that's out there. It's not real, right? And a lot of people spend a lot of time trying to please people that aren't real, trying to please anonymous bots and stuff like that. And you have to not care about that, right? So anyway, as far as Libyan options and all that, Gaddafi made a lot of mistakes towards the end of his life, and he was very isolated when shit went down in 2011. I'll put it that way. I really admire Gaddafi in a lot of ways, but things may not have gone down the way they did in 2011 if he hadn't made certain decisions. But then he made those decisions for a reason, and that's the whole thing. You can't have regret, right? You really can't have regret, right? People always say, "Oh, if only I had done blank." Yeah, but you didn't. And you didn't do blank because the circumstances in your life would not have allowed that. If you could have done blank, you would have done blank, but you didn't. So you can't have regret. And that's one thing I've learned. A lot of people ask me weird questions on here. Caleb, what if the Soviet Union hadn't dissolved? Do you know how many things would have to be different for the Soviet Union to have not dissolved? There's like so many other things. So by asking, what if the Soviet Union hadn't dissolved? You're asking like huge, like there's a huge amount of like everything in the world is different. Butterfly effect. Like That's a question you can't ask. Right? And so then people say, well, what if I had studied this in college instead of that? Well, how many things would have had to be different in your life for you to make that decision? Like, every choice you make is intrinsically tied up with the circumstances and the context of that choice, right? You do have free will. And we are, I would say, constantly learning from our experiences and making decisions. But every decision that we make in life is made in the context and with the knowledge and with the experience and the perspective that we had at that time. There's no way you could have made a different decision, right? There's not, right? Now, you might do it, you might make a similar decision now. You might choose to do things differently now than you did before. You might see things differently. You might have gained more wisdom and experience. But there's no way that decision that you made 20 years ago or 10 years ago or 50 years ago or 20 years ago or 30 years ago could have been any different, because you made it for a reason and you made it in a context. And this is, you can't regret. A lot of people get into this weird trap, right? I always encourage people to avoid any hamster wheel. And there are many different hamster wheels, right? We know what the hamster wheel is. The hamster, he gets in there and he spins around and he spins around and he spins around. I always tell people to avoid hamster wheels. And there are many different types of hamster wheels. And one of the hamster wheels is shoulda, coulda, woulda, because there's no way you shoulda, coulda, woulda. It just doesn't work that way. There's a lot of other hamster wheels. People sit there, I was born in the wrong time. No, you weren't. No, you weren't. You don't know that. If you were born in that other time, you would have been a different person. Maybe you feel like you don't fit in the time you are now, right? And maybe you feel like in a different time you would have fit in better. But if you were born in that time, you would be a totally different person. You would have totally different parents. You would have had a totally different experience. You would have seen different media. Yeah, and so you don't know. Maybe you wouldn't have fit in that time. You don't know. Well, and I have people who say, well, if Caleb, if you were Chinese, if I was Chinese, I would have different parents because my parents are not Chinese. I would have had a different upbringing experience because I was not born in China. I was born in Ohio. So don't tell me, Caleb, if you were Chinese, there's so many things that would have been different if I were Chinese. That doesn't work. I say, Caleb, if you were Cuban, if I was Cuban, I would speak Spanish, not English. I would have been born in a different place. I would have had different parents, different friends, would have gone to it. Like, everything is different. You can't do this, right? And many people, I was born in the wrong place. I was born in the wrong time. If only I had made this decision. None of that that is all not a serious thought. It's a complete waste of time. It is a waste of your intellectual effort, because there's no way any of those things could have changed without so many other things changing that we're completely in a different universe, right? I mean, maybe this works in a sci-fi novel. Maybe this works in, a sci-fi novel. Someone goes back in time and changes this or that. But in real life, we can't go back in time, number one. And number two, we couldn't, because things are the way they are, right? For a reason. Things happen for a reason. Very, 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 very few things in this world are random. Very few things in this world are random. However, there is not among humans, let me put it this way, among humans, there's not one intentional source. And this is where people get all confused, right? So first of all, right, everything happens because of things that have happened before, because of things that happen around it, because of the context it evolves in. But that said, there's not one conspiracy. And that one problem that I've noticed, right, as I'm critical, is that, we talk about conspiracy theories, for example. Conspiracy theorists will often tell you there's one group of controllers who have all the power. If that was the case, the world would be a much more efficient place. There's not. There's a lot of different powerful people that are pushing on each other with different agendas. Now, those powerful people will conspire, and those powerful people will try to get things done. They will conceal their agendas, and all of that exists, sure. But they're not all on the same team, and there are powerful forces pushing back on them, and it's much more complicated. And often the way things develop is not, often when people take an action, they don't ultimately realize what the result will be. Right? And that's another thing. It's like people say, well, they did this and that was intended to do that. No, not necessarily. Right? They did this and that led to this. And a lot of times things have unintended consequences. There are different forces of power in this world that are pulling on each other, that are trying to get different things done, number one. And a lot of times those forces, they want one thing and they do something that leads to something completely different. And they don't understand the outcome. Because in real life is not a video game. In a video game, right, you either push A or you push B. You either go left or you go right. It's a very limited reality. But the real world has many, 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 many factors in it that can't fit into a video game. A video game, you can push A or you can push B, you can go up, you can go down. But in the real world, there are many factors that can't get included. You cannot possibly predict every factor involved in a situation. So you don't want to, on the one hand, blow up causality and make it sound like everything's a big conspiracy, because there are people who conspire and there are different powerful forces that do manipulate things, but they contend with each other and they have different agendas, and they often can't predict the outcome of their actions. Now, often they're playing catch up, number one. And number two, you can't just say things are random. If only I'd done this or that. Everything happens in the context, right? That it's not one person deciding necessarily, but there are many, many factors that lead to things happening. You can't go back in time. You'll say, what if JFK had not been killed? Well, what would have had to have changed for that to have happened? There's about 1 million things that would have had to change for JFK to have not have been killed in Dallas. It's not just, it's like somebody wouldn't have had to been here and somebody wouldn't have been there and these things, they happen for a reason. They happen for a number of different reasons, So, you can play the what if game, but you really can't. You really can't. You got to just kind of look at the world with the understanding that things happen. But within all this chaos, you have to maneuver for what you believe is right. And it's important to maintain a positive attitude. And it's important to have confidence in your own ability to reshape the world around you and improve it. And it's important to expect the best from the world. And it is important to connect with other people and become more human by finding that connection. And it is important to learn to take the world around you and improve it and innovate. And if you can do those things, you can find happiness in this world. And we live in a very confusing world and a very confusing time at that. But you just got to maneuver within all of this and do your best for what you believe is right and for what you know is right. And you have to not exist in isolation. And it gets back to the whole thing about living biologically. You have to take ownership of your life. You got to not just be going through the motions. You got to say, I will do this. I will do that. You got to challenge yourself. But anyway, this is the kind of stuff I could talk about all night, and I'm exhausted. I'm exhausted, and I've got to get on a bus again tomorrow. You'll see some videos soon about what I've been up to lately. It's important. It's important. It's not the kind of thing I would normally pay attention to, but it's very important. It is. I don't underestimate the importance of it. It's important, so you'll see. But this is the most important event that's going to happen this year. This is the biggest thing CPI has ever done. Be there. Don't miss it. Be in the auditorium July 12th. You won't regret it. Working families first, defeat the deep state, embrace a new world of peace and innovation. It's going to be really, really important to have you there. So we've talked about a lot of important stuff here tonight. So I'm going to put on the closing music. Thanks, everybody. I'm glad we could have this check-in. I'll be back as soon as I can manage to be back. Not sure when that'll be because I'm traveling and then I'm traveling and then I'm traveling. And wow, I'm very busy, but I'm accomplishing a lot. So let's do it. New upsurge in the struggle against U.S. imperialism is now emerging throughout the world. Ever since World War II, U.S. imperialism and its followers have been continuously launching wars of aggression. But the people of various countries have been continuously waging revolutionary wars to defeat their aggression. And while the danger of a new world war still exists, and the people of all countries must get prepared, revolution is the main trend in the world today.